I think the greatest title any of us carry is friend. That we get to, I mean, I feel like Speakeasy has been a real friend machine for myself and for a lot of people. And so I hope you find yourself here. I hope you find your God here, and I hope you find some friends here. Like that's the money. So welcome. It's great to be here with you, with all people I consider my friends, you know. And today we're talking about altered states. And the title made me laugh a little bit because maybe like you, I began to think of like aliens and trips on mushrooms. Those are some altered states. And honestly, I don't think we would be too far off because the altered the altered state that we're talking about today, they are what sometimes feels like supernatural, and they have the power to bring us to a sense of euphoria or samadhi, which is a state of profound mental concentration and unity with the highest reality. And after samadhi, and that's a Hindu term, we arrive at nirvana, a permanent state of being free from suffering and the cycles of rebirth. But for now, we're here. And this state of accepting that you are, and moving towards, hopefully, the state of accepting that you are, that we are nothing short, as Clive said, of an altar for love. That's what your life is, that's what your purpose is. And that no matter what you do or don't do, or no matter what's been done to you, has no ability to alter the altar. And this is how Jesus was able to walk to his own crucifixion, was that he was in that state that was not altered by the conditions of the world. This state is also available to us because he said, this and greater things shall you do. And, it comes by perhaps spiritual practices, by praying. And one of the directions that he gave us was specifically to pray for your enemy. And another figure popped into my mind when thinking about this idea of moving in this unaltered state towards your divinity, which was Ruby Bridges. And she was a little girl who, for whatever reason, her karma was chosen to be this child who was supposed to help break the segregation of schools in the South. And through that, it seemed to me that she acquired some strength and perhaps samadhi. It happened 56 years ago. That's not that long ago. And for some of you who are students of A Course in Miracles, A Course in Miracles is celebrating its 50th year. So this happened a little before that. And it happened in New Orleans, and this, crowd of protesters would gathered around daily this school, shouting slurs and death threats at this little girl. Throngs of like angry people with Confederate flags, and with even one woman showed up with a coffin with a little doll in it, a little black doll in it. And imagine going to school like that. And the way that she did was that she would walk through the door with two government officials to escort her to school, and she would pray. And her teacher, the one woman who was said that she would teach her, because some of the teachers said they wouldn't even teach her. She noticed that Ruby was speaking to herself on the way to school. And there was a therapist, Dr. Cole. And so she went to the therapist and she said, I think it might be good to talk to her. And so he did. And he said, how are you doing? And and we noticed that you're talking on the way to school. And she said, yeah, I'm praying. And he said, well, who are you praying for? And she said, well, all the people that are yelling at me. It's like a beautiful thing. And he said, where did you learn that? She said, from church and from my parents. And he said, well, what's the prayer that you say? Please, dear God, forgive them because they don't know what they're doing. So that's, a direct line from Jesus on the cross. And we're in this time before Easter where we contemplate this ability to pray for your enemy. Now, that's the type of prayer that when you do it, you can't do it if you have forgotten yourself, if you have forgotten that you're an altar. It's not the type of prayer you're going to be able to do. And you can be sure that if you're not doing that type of prayer, that you probably have forgotten yourself. I know that when I can't do that type of prayer, I have forgotten myself, and that I've entered into an altered state, a state of being that I have that I have decided is, has shifted, is distorted, is eclipsed. My holy state has been eclipsed by fear. Something has been altered that has prevented me from being my holy self. This is a state that happens when we don't remember our holiness. We get eclipsed because somewhere along the line we lost sight of our true nature. So instead of simply being, we live in this altered state in hopes of hiding, and really hiding from ourselves, half lit, half seen, not fully stepping into the brilliance of who we're really meant to be. And even as we begin to wake up to that brilliance, we can still get distorted and confused along the way. And I'll give you a few examples of how that might look, because it's not always obvious. When I first began this year, Bella and I sat down and we listened and we got the prompt, pray your way home. And for some reason, I decided to focus on prayer. So I'll just shortcut, it's a year of prayer. And it's funny because have you ever gotten a direction from God, which was really pretty specific, and you're like, I'm just going to make it my own. And I don't really know, pray your way home. So I'll just make it make sense to me. Or maybe you get an intuition, or maybe you get a direction and you think, well, I'm half willing to do that. So I'm just going to do the part that I like. So I'll do the prayer part. But I don't really know about the idea of praying your way home, or if that prayer could ever take you all the way home. It doesn't always completely make sense to me. So I'm not going to do that. But if we were to take the specific directions of the divine, maybe prayer could get you all the way home. And if I were to attempt to be willing to not edit God, what would my life be like? I don't always live there, and maybe you don't either. Instead, sometimes we take the directions of God and we limit them from our vantage point. And this prevents us from leaning fully into the direction. What would happen if we stopped limiting God with our conditions? What would happen if I fully devoted myself to not having to make sense, but just trusting that I don't have to have it all figured out, that I could, for example, just begin to pray my way home and stay the course of what's mine to do. In thinking about this, I was thinking, Jesus, like God said to Jesus, like, you're going to walk yourself to your crucifixion, and said to Blessed Mother, like, you're going to deliver Christ, and said to Ruby Bridges, like, you're going to end segregation. And I'm like, those are big things. And God's like, you're going to, just pray your way home this year with your community. I'm like, meh. You know what I mean? Like, I don't even have big things. I have little things that I don't do, so I don't know if this is true for you. If I were to implement this idea of pray your way home, I would need a bigger faith. I would need to look at that part of my mind that says, sure, I'll spend my days praying and singing and practice, but like, I don't know if I'm ever actually going to get home. I don't know if I'm going to have that experience of full reverberation of the divine, or expect that mutual harmony that's promised when you think about returning home to your divine. And that's something for sages, my mind tells me. And I don't know if I'll get there in this lifetime. But there's a place within me, within us, that might get there or might not get there, depending on our worthiness and our willingness. That's all it ever is do we feel worthy to follow the directions of the divine? And do we feel willing to follow the directions of the divine? And if we don't, then we'll go about the world journeying with our divine, listening to the voice of God, but only picking parts of the message that serves our understanding. And we'll come sort of half-baked to these experiences and invitations, so that we'll have an altered experience instead of a full-blown faith. We still make exceptions when we're told, pray for your enemy. When you're told, love everyone as you would be loved, we still make exceptions. And we still look at the stimuli of our lives and our situations and our personalities, and we find, certain aspects of ourselves out there in the world unlovable, that we don't love. And those things could be a call for love, but still we don't even answer the call for love. And with every practice that we invest in, this alternative love, it sort of gives us the permission to lay another layer of paint over a pot of hatred, a pot of fear, in hopes that no one will notice. But people notice. I mean, your life is a direct reflection of your consciousness. And so we get to look at that. Like, am I all the way in? And when will I get all the way in? We practice together in this community in the early hours, but by the afternoon, I don't know about you, but some days I'm constructing altars of fear and crucifixions of hatred. So the devotion in the early hours when the birds are still out and you can still hear them, and grievance and fear, and resentment hasn't fully sunk its fingernails into the day. It's easy to imagine an unclipsed experience. But threading that devotion through every hour, like keeping the consistency, keeping fresh our high resolve, keeping it in every breath, you might think that's impossible. I have friends who have told me that's impossible. That's not for us. And I have lived a life that has demonstrated that it's impossible. Not just to be at home in God, but to be an unaltered state of God's awareness, to be the home of God. As Mary demonstrated when she said, when she not just demonstrated, she was called Mary full of grace. There was no space within her that was not filled with grace. She was filled all the way with grace. Are you filled all the way with grace? Can we get there? She had this impeccable faith that allowed her to birth Christ. And I think some of us feel like, well, that's not really for me. That's not really attainable for us mere mortals. We still have certain figures on a pedestal. And we say, well, unlike Mary, I haven't entertained any angels. I don't get visitation from angels. If I did, maybe I would. This morning on our morning call, Liliana was telling us how she felt this angel by her side. And when she told us that to the group, I felt like, oh my God, here on this day that I'm going to give a talk where I'm saying we're mere mortals, we don't entertain angels. Then my sister is telling me that she has entertained angels this morning. And I felt a little bit like Elizabeth when Mary tells Elizabeth that she's pregnant. And I was like, oh, well, if it's happening for you, maybe it could happen for me. And within me leaped a faith that said, does my faith include visitations from angels? And maybe I've already entertained them and I don't even know. When it comes to, us average Joes, it can feel like saints and sages just do a flyby over our houses. And yet I am aware of the unaltered state that says, I could be wrong, so I could be right, so I could move into my right-mindedness and then never leave. We could be right that we are worthy, that we are each worthy and capable of having consistent faith in all hours. And that in devotion, we will, as Mary demonstrated, not only find ourselves full orbed, and audacious against the night sky, but that we will also be willing to lose ourselves, because that's what happens after we find ourselves, is that we begin to lose ourselves. And I think that's the scary part, that we'll lose ourselves. We'll not get hung up on this glorious state that we see ourselves as full of grace, but we'll then lose ourselves to defer that brilliance to the divine that lives on the unseen side of things, that is just illuminating us like the sun illuminates stained glass windows. That we'll essentially lose ourselves into love. We'll understand how to step aside and relinquish our will fully to God's will and faithfully follow the guidance to the letter with no exceptions, with no misinterpretations. Now, I don't know that I've acquired that willingness. I would like to think that I have. I would like to think that you have, because we're having this conversation. If we were, we would also birth Christ. We would also have that samadhi that relinquishes suffering and even the necessity for rebirth. Like, we would see it as our lives as eternal. So what's the holdup? Aren't you wondering? Like, what is the holdup? Like, have I not listened to the voice of God? have we not listened? I mean, we've been listening to the voice of God, but I know for me that I sometimes filter that voice through my limitations and my low self-esteem and my grievances and my addictions. And that's what's happening. That's what's happening for all of us. So we've gotten far, but we haven't gotten all the way. And to be more than that, we would have to relinquish this ever idling conversation of the ego that has us convinced that we're not capable, to be more than what the ego has convinced us that we are. So I would really love to commit to stepping into that willingness, that full blown, unaltered willingness to be more than the ego has convinced us that we are, to live that unconflicted life that my friend Linda was talking about this morning on the call. So I want to at least believe that we are capable of it, that God doesn't play favorites, that our holiness amplifies our happiness rather than coming at the cost of it. I think that's one of the fears, that if we're that holy, we won't be happy, but that our holiness amplifies our happiness rather than coming at the cost of it, and that our holiness doesn't come at the cost of our happiness at all, that it actually gives us even more reasons to rejoice and be glad. I want to believe in the possibility of a consistent faith. I'm also aware that we're walking each other home, and that we will vacillate when we move through this idea of finding and losing ourselves until we get to that happy acquisition to God's plan. And in that letting go of our own plan and living into God's plan, we will feel that peace. Now, I don't mean to suggest that it's easy, or else we would have gotten there already. But after all that's been lost and all that's been found, I mean, we are recognizing that we have our nose in the right direction. And I think it's that last losing that most frightens us, that we've placed like this limitation, these gilded cages that offer us this false security of who we think we are. And it's hard-won consciousness that is willing to surrender even that and completely trust and say, no more of what Maureen wants. Like, I will to will God's will. I will to will God's will. Let it be done unto me. Let it be done unto me in the morning, in the afternoon, and in the evening. That kind of consistency, I think, has most of us running towards the hills, manipulating and misinterpreting God's plan. And we spend a lot of effort in these other plans, these alternative plans, these altered plans that have us hating and berating and complaining and fearing and fixating on problems. And we spend a lot of effort doing that. That takes a lot of effort to do that, instead of simply doing God's plan. So the full guidance for this year was pray your way home. And even as I tried to forget that last part, God is consistent. God's plan will not be denied, not for you, not for me. And so I began to remember, because I kept getting these prompts about home. And you've heard me talk about this for the last couple of weeks, is this thing about home. This thing keeps coming up. And so that's the same for you. Like, even as you deny God's plan for you, it will continue to knock. You cannot go rogue on God. You can't get too far. I mean, you can run down the block and distract yourself at a Trader Joe's or at a TJ Maxx, but you'll meet God right at the cash register. I mean, she's there. And you may, drown yourself in some alcohol, but you'll meet God at the bottom of your glass. And you'll run into your lovers and you'll try and hide your grievances and accusations that you fling out at the world, only to find that it's been knitted like a bullseye on your own back. And all the arrows that you sling out in the world will perfectly and with perfect precision and penetration find their way back home to you. You know this already. So, and I don't tell you that to scare you, but to wake you up, to wake me up, to know that these God nudges, like, they're for us. You can't hide from them. So the inner invitation, the odd calling, this pressure that I was feeling was just to do some simple things. Again, like God was not hard on me. It wasn't walk to your crucifixion. It wasn't give birth to Christ. It wasn't end segregation. It was simply bless your house. I can't tell you how long it took me to bless my house. And I told everybody in the community, bless your house, bless your house. Hopefully you've done that. Maybe you haven't. And it doesn't mean that that's your nudge, but it is interesting to think if you came to Sunday morning and heard somebody you trust say, go bless your house. And if you haven't, like, why not? You know? Because that doesn't mean it's yours to do. It just means that it could be, if you bless your house, it could give you a closer conversation with your divine, just because it's a show of willingness. That's all it is a show of willingness. So I listened and I hear and I put that plan on the back burner until my other priorities are right. Right. And maybe this is why you haven't blessed your house yet. But here's the thing, like I said, we can dock and we can pivot, even if we try and evade it. God is consistent. So I'm here again today to say, bless your house. Go into each room, ring a bell, light a candle. And then I answered. So I did that. And I began receiving the next prompt for me. There was 3 things that came up for me around this prompt. And as I said, like sometimes I'm on a need to know basis with God. So the first one was bless your house. And I did that. And then the next one was open up your house. And again, I was like, no. I was reluctant. I was like, it's too much. I've hosted enough parties in my life. Like, I don't want to host anymore. But again, just like God keeps knocking. So I do the thing that I was supposed to do. And I open up my house and I have these moon gatherings. And this woman comes over and teaches me ukulele. And people are coming in and going and coming and going. And we had a toast and jam recently. And I noticed that when the guidance comes to me and invites me into doing the very simple things, I don't say, let it be done unto me. I say, I gave at the office, go away. I'm too busy. I'm doing my version of what I think I'm supposed to be doing. Maybe this is true for you. I imagine that it's true for you. And again, I don't want to make anybody wrong, and I don't want to make myself wrong. I just want to look at my resistance. That's all I'm looking at is my resistance. Do you attempt to shoo God from your front stoop because you're entertaining other unworthy characters in crucifixions? Like you don't have time, to bake your neighbor some granola because you're scrolling TikTok like me? Do you pass the man on the street who's begging for money and you know you're supposed to open your wallet like I do, but instead you think, well, I'll get him next time? Why? What am I waiting for? Or do you tell yourself, oh, recently I was out with a friend and I saw a man begging and she said, don't give him any money. He might be a drug addict. Who am I listening to? Am I listening to God or am I listening to my fear projected through someone else's mouth? And what a warped interpretation, that I put off love. What am I accepting in lieu of love? I don't want to live a life in lieu of love. Do we want to rest our heads under a tombstone that said this woman lived in lieu of love? Instead, she gave her life to judgment and her interpretation of God's plan? That would be a sad obituary. So this is not just an example of how we refuse to hear the actual call and the message, but to admit that we have heard the call. But are we brave enough to continue to follow through? Like I said, to the letter. Like, what are you not hearing in your life? So eventually I blessed my home, I opened my doors, and then came the last invitation, which I thought was very interesting because it was simply find the altar. And man, can I mess up a message? If you're anything like me, I have 1,000 altars in my house. You could throw a dart and land anywhere, and there's an altar. I love, clustering things together, lighting candles, and I was like, find the altar. Great. I'm going to create an altar. And I went off to Trader Joe's and I brought some flowers and some candles and I arranged some shells and some figurines, and as you do, and but still that nagging nudge was coming to me, find the altar, find the altar. So I had to look again at what I wasn't willing to see. So I did. And I saw again how I'd taken the simple prompt of God and I had switched it. It didn't say create an altar. It said find the altar. But I went ahead and I created another altar, which is like creating another religion. It's not necessary. We have enough altars. So I had just decided to make my own meaning of it. And that's why I needed to go back to God and ask, like, what was that? What did that mean? I often tell people, if you're still confused about the direction of God in your life, then you probably haven't asked again. Go back and ask again. What do you mean by this? How do I find an altar? Like you, I have spent many years seeking altars, trying to find altars, trying to find myself, trying to find my God, trying to find my purpose, trying to find my keys. I can keep seeking all day and night. And like you, I have retreated to religions and temples and traveled and studied with gurus and goddesses and, to be satiated for a moment and then seek again and seek again. And I've sought for things outside my grasp, beyond my reach, even. Oh, the next workshop or the next book, I will find what I'm seeking a person or a place or a philosophy that will complete me and carry me home. But of course, we know that that's never going to work. You're the king of your consciousness. You're the queen of your castle. And like Dorothy, we get to remember it's in us. We're addicted to seeking, but we've been looking in the wrong place. The altar is not a temple built by hand. It's within us. It's our minds. And what we place on the altar, whether we place grievances or gratitude or fear or love, determines on whether we're actually going to experience our Holy Communion. You're the temple you've been seeking. Your mind is the altar. And as the poet in me just loves that. It's not lost on me that the word temple, where your mind seems to exist, also refers to a place of worship. The original Latin word means consecrated piece of ground or building, worship meant for worshiping God. You are the temple, your mind is the altar. But we don't always consider our mind as a holy ground. In fact, we actively trespass against this holy ground and bring in all kinds of thoughts that are not worthy for an altar. The etymology of the word a temple, when referred to the sides of your head, this is interesting, means time, means temporal. So you have one word, one means holy ground, and the other interpretation of the word means time. When we're in time, we are in an altered state, when we're not experiencing the fullness of our truth. But in the holy mind, when we turn that mind over to God, we get to experience where miracles are our natural way of being. And that's where we have true holy connection. And when we reach this state and accept this state, we're no longer seeking, right? And you have grasped a moment or two of that. It's easy for us to find the altar, to be the altar in that state, to dedicate all that we are to the will of God when we find and experience that state. In A Course in Miracles, I find this little section in A Course in Miracles very interesting in regards to this. Miracles make minds one in God. They depend on cooperation because the sonship is the sum of all that God created. Miracles, therefore, reflect the laws of eternity, not of time. And so when we decide to live in the realm of miracles, we change the temples of time into the temples of eternity. And here's the good news. The altar has always been there for us, is waiting for us even now. It means that we have choice. We can either live under the laws of time, of fear, of separation, of struggle, or we can surrender to the eternal state of love. That's when we get all the way home. This altar of God is not outside of us, it's within us. And when we return our minds to God, we're like prodigal sons and daughters, finding our way all the way home, awakening that dormant miracle worker within us that is worthy to sit knee to knee and heart to heart with Jesus, Mary, Ruby Bridges, and all of the wonderful men and women who have made great advancements in the name of love. So the call is to come home to that space, to bless your home, to open the doors, to find the altar, to take a knee, to bow to your brilliance, your own soul, to let the directions of the divine be done unto you, to not take those directions and re-manipulate them to your liking, but to just follow. And that, my friend, is the true altered state. The state of giving your life to God, to guide today and every day, to return to remember that you are the altar, that you had it in you all along. That's the word.
Now it's time for the truly unique experience of Speakeasy Sunday service, our community conversation. This is where we invite you to speak easily, find your voice and your truth, and share your thoughts, inspirations, awareness, and your questions with the community. And I'll get us started because happy to say I had a revelation.
Good. That's what you want.
I really had a revelation. Your talk today caused me to realize, or I was tapped on the shoulder or whatever, that I have a habit of asking Holy Spirit for help and then walking on without Holy Spirit.
You're not alone.
And then when I don't get to where I want, where I think I should be, then I go back to Holy Spirit. And I had never really noticed that I kind of got my ticket and then went, thank you, and then kept right on walking and leaving Holy Spirit out of the picture.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do that too. It's so interesting to be aware of that. I actually wrote in the sermon, but guess I didn't say it, but I finished God's sentence. Like, I asked God, and God's starting to answer me, and I'm like, okay, to the store, fine, goodbye. And like, it's like I'm not even letting God finish her sentence before I'm off and down the block and around the corner.
Mm.
I know that. I know that I do that. You probably do that too. And I'm glad that you notice that you do it, because what is it based on? Impatience. It's just impatience. I do not like the slow roll. And I also fear scarcity. Everything is based on the scarcity principle. So I think those are the two things that we get to heal together, is like really letting God take its time and really learning how to listen completely.
Mm.
Yeah.
Maureen, I just wanted to say that your sermons are coming from your heart and from your experience. And, most sermons are people kind of like talking really loud to you, and you speak softly. And it's wonderful. And all I've got to say is that when we talked earlier, I had this it was like synchronistic, because I realized our connection is the Divine Mother. I believe that once we start walking this path, and the Course says it, that once you take a step, that God will be right behind you, and Our Lady will be right behind you, and Jesus will be right behind you. So,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for saying that I have a soft voice, because sometimes I have really come in like a tribe of horses on fire, and I have had to slow down. And I feel like I've been slowing down my entire life. Like when I first started acting, God, my acting coach was like, slow down. And the reason I was going so fast, part of the reason I was going so fast in the beginning, is because I didn't feel like I was worthy of taking time. And so I was in that temple of time as opposed to that altar of expansiveness. And this is a universal disease. Some people feel like they don't want to take time to the point where they don't even speak. I appreciate your reflecting to me my healing around that. That's a big one. And I encourage people, this thing about home, about blessing it, about opening the doors, about the altar, has nothing to do actually with your home, but with your consciousness. Open up your consciousness. Find the sacredness of your consciousness and entertain everything from there. And when you do that, you become a very gracious host, beyond what you could even recognize for yourself. I mean, Steve, I don't know about you, but I've always, I have come through the filters of a hot mess. You know, just like running
Oh,
fast down the track in the wrong way. Our practices polish us, right? So they polish the ego off, but they also polish a version of ourselves that's that's so much easier to exist in. Do you know, when we exist in the static of ego, it's hard. It's hard. It's hard to be in that.
I also found out we both collect Virgin Mary statues, but I think she's way ahead of me. You pro you, you probably got hundreds of them. I collect them, and people come to my house and they think I'm a Catholic religious fanatic. And but
I give them away a lot too, so I the easy come, easy go. But
yeah.
yeah, but yeah, so yeah, yeah, and you know, so that's an altar. You know, it's nice. It is nice to have altars in your home. I did, you know, if anybody came to this talk today to like understand like how to build an altar, that might be disappointed. But there is something beautiful about your home. If your house is in disarray and your house plants are dying, it's, you know, take a look at that, not to harm yourself, but to pay attention to where you might be congested and then clear that in form to help you clear that in consciousness. It's just a ritual. It's just saying, this is, I am a bit congested. I'm a bit of a hoarder. I'm holding on to things. Let me work with the Holy Spirit so that I can clear this in form and then also heal it in consciousness.
Thank you for that, Maureen, because I'm doing spring cleaning.
Wanted to give a shout out for Beth, who helped me do a blessing in the rental home that I'm in. And I would never have thought to do it because I wasn't living in the present. I wasn't grateful for the present. And it all started with Sherry saying, love where you are. And I really resist that because it's like, no, I don't like that. That's not what I want, blah, blah, blah. But in that, going through the process and the preparations and actually walking with her and slowing down to answer questions about what the meaning for this space is.
Yeah.
And by extension, is what made me raise my hand was you're saying in many ways that we walk this earth with our home anyway. So where do I want my home, where I am the sacred, safe place, which I am wherever I am? But by ignoring and blocking the good and the love in this building, I was cheating the peace, and I was not enjoying what is. Just
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, I mean, Joni, we often think about praying for our enemies as people, but you are making an enemy of your home. That's, you know what I mean?
I
We
didn't.
make an enemy of our bodies.
Oh yeah.
We make an enemy of our foods. So like when we begin to like incorporate everything, like again, like that is, and that is not a full-blown faith, but I'm only saying that because I don't have that either. But we're doing that. That's where we're going.
Hey, everybody. It's so interesting, Joni, because we used to help each other. We had the deep cleaning club. And so each of us would pick a weekend and we'd go and help the other person clean. So it's often very nice to do it with someone else, right? And but my question is more around something that you were saying at the beginning. And I kind of feel like I understand it, but I'm going to just ask it. So is home in both our physical and spiritual? Do you know what I'm saying? I'm trying to, I mean, obviously we're physical and spiritual beings. And so
Yeah.
at temple, how do we actually,
Yeah.
pull them
Well,
together?
yeah. You know, first of all, home, what a beautiful word. You know, what a beautiful word. And the prodigal son, what a beautiful story. And the beauty of that story is that he goes home. And when he goes home, he's welcome there. Like that is just the most beautiful thing that any of us want. That's what our soul craves for. So it's not to find a home or build a home, it's to be a home, to be a space of welcoming. We often think of ourselves as the prodigal son, but we could be the prodigal father. Am I welcoming everything? Am I celebrating everything? Form follows consciousness. So it's not, the form is not important at all. You could live on the street and be happier than a man who has 1,000 homes. And we've seen that, right? And you think you own your home owns you, if you don't have a holy relationship with it.
Yeah.
So,
Loving all parts of it too is what I'm hearing as well.
sorry?
Loving all parts of it is
Yeah.
what I'm hearing as well.
Yeah. And it can be a spiritual practice to go through your living room, your dining room. It can be a spiritual practice for sure, because you can feel the energetic different when you begin to clean up some things. So, and yeah, so I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks so much.
Oh my goodness, what a wonderful, absolutely wonderful subject today, Maureen, because that our home, this is our home. Everything that we experience, we're here to experience God through form. That's what we're doing. We're experiencing God through form so that God can experience through form. And as you were saying earlier, talking about your life, and my life is God in form, and I'm expressing God through form, and I'm experiencing God through form. My home is a shrine. You probably noticed that. There's not a place in my home that you wouldn't come into and feel like you were in a holy space if you were so inclined to feel that. Because yes, we, sage the rooms, we bless, but I bless every day. I bless every day, bless and am grateful for my life as an expression of God's love. And that's what you are, Maureen, and that's what your life is. And so if I say, man, I have a really shitty life, what does that have to say about God's life?
Yeah.
It's when I say, I am so blessed and can see how blessed I am, that I know that God's life is here right now.
Yes, 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 yes. And Steve mentioned something to me about my voice being gentle. It's so funny. But when you're speaking, Lynn, I hear that in you. I hear that although your home is a shrine, your voice is the gospel. Like your voice has been dedicated to teaching spiritual principles 24/7, and you can hear it in your voice. When you speak, people enter your home. That's when people enter your home, when you speak. And you're telling them everything they need to know about you. And some people will deny that they can hear in your voice everything, but we can all hear everything if we're willing to listen. We can feel the vibration of each other, and we can hear discord, and we can hear harmony. We can hear that. Even if your voice is craggly and old and congested or whatever, that doesn't mean anything. What we're hearing is we're hearing the river beneath the river. And the more you cultivate that in yourself, the more you can hear it in others too. And that's a beautiful thing. So I hear the God in you. Thank you. And here she is,
Hey,
Gordon.
what a beautiful, beautiful talk. And I think what came up for me that I felt called to share was the very first time I blessed my home. It was just a time of out of frustration. It was like there's clutter and it just seems to be surreally gathering and I don't know what to do. And my first thought was to learn about feng shui. And through that, I learned about space clearing. And space clearing is really a blessing of your home. And I had no idea how much of a difference that would make for me. But I felt different inside my home.
Yes.
my daughter, who I think was 8 at the time or something, you know, this is like 25 years ago. She would say, "It feels different, Mom." And then a few days later, I had not told anybody about doing this. A few days later, my mom came over and she kept looking around going, "Did you paint something different?
Mhm.
Paint?" You know, and I was like, "No, I didn't paint." And she's like, "It feels good. It feels better in here." And you know, she's real sensitive. And over the years, I have re-blessed it and re-blessed it. And you know, as my life has changed, it's almost like a spring, an energetic and spiritual spring cleaning for the home. So the whole idea of like you can dedicate your home and bless it, but you can also rededicate it and re-bless it.
Yes.
The same space, and it's that consciousness taking it wherever you go. So
Yeah. And I know it seems, I mean, I know part of my mind is like, it seems frivolous to talk about the form like this because it's all consciousness, but I also get that I'm also speaking to this this zeitgeist, this current zeitgeist of escapism that's like, we need to get the hell out of here. You know what I mean? Instead of saying, no, you need to be the light right here in this space. And you need to have your home sanctified, and you need to have your heart sanctified. And that is not a frivolous thing. That's a real applicable thing. I remember when I used to cater parties, and we would do Passover or Seder, I think, when they keep the door open, you know, when they set a seat for
Elijah.
Elijah. And I was Catholic, so I was like, who's Elijah? When's he getting here? But, you know, I feel like in this, I mean, I feel like I don't want to sound like a zealot, but I'm like, open the door to Elijah, set a table, set a seat for him. I think I think it's a symbol of the honored guest, of the holiness that your home could contain. If you haven't thought about that, like it's when we talk about the body, everything's the body. The body, the physicality, the home, your body of work, all of it needs to be sanctified, which means turned over to the Holy Spirit. And so it seems frivolous, but it's just a part of it, and it's important, I think.
Yeah. And I just think it speaks to the consciousness that you're bringing into anything you're doing. Your home, you know, you can bless your car so that wherever you are, it's not just your home that's blessed. You're blessed everywhere you go.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, and just remembering that.
Yeah. And then you can help to heal this fear of escapism. Like, there's someplace else I can go to be safe. No, you create safety through your fearlessness, through your willingness to turn everything over to the Holy Spirit.
Yeah. That. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And it's interesting that the talk was about the altar, but it was also speaking about home. And I've had some synchronicity around home today. So for the last, I don't know how long it's taken me, but the original Course in Miracles notes, I've just been going through them, and I happened to finish this morning. So my last page was this morning, which was really good. And the last sentence was, "For we have reached where all of us are one, and we are home where you would have us be," which I thought was beautiful. But then what I realized as I was going through the notes, because at the end of some of the pages, she dates, and she finishes the notes in October 1968. And I was born in July 1968. So she finished just a couple of months after I was born, which I thought was really beautiful, that this was prepared, for me. I know, a little bit arrogant, but I could, spin it. But my birthday lesson, the lesson that falls on my birthday, the 21st of July, you can note that, guys, if you want, I'm happy for any presents. You know. But my birthday lesson is I will be still an instant and go home,
Oh,
which I just think is just the most beautiful because I was one of the homeless, literally, wandering around, struggling in life. And then I've actually, having the like, synchronicities, it's just been really beautiful, and then listening to your talk as well. And I'm really glad you included consciousness a lot, because that's where my journey's been taking me more recently, about, just touching that consciousness. And as we touch that consciousness, the oneness of that, and it's like, there's no point arguing with anybody, fighting with anybody, or aggressing, or because it's just you. And I know the course teaches this clearly, but it's taken a little bit longer for that to sink in. So I've had to go and seek some extra teaching and whatever for that, to imbibe in it, and it's but I feel more settled in that understanding. And I'm just feeling in a really peaceful place. And yeah, it's really good to hear you more. Thank you.
thank you. I will be still an instant and go home. That is a good one. Yes.
Thank you, Christy.
I just wanted to share that we're all blessed. That's lesson number 40, and to see your brother as yourself, to be kind to all. I lately I've been thinking of Ken Wapnick's quote. He says, "When you're really kind to all, you really don't need the metaphysics of this course," and that's true. It's like a hack. Just be kind to all. You really don't need the course, period.
I love it. Thanks for that. Yeah. Yep. Yes, 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 yes. Kind to all, yourself included. Yeah. I wanted to make a few announcements. If you want to participate in our service as a musician or as a prayer practitioner or as a host, we are always open and ready to highlight your voice and your visibility and your value. And that's just one way that you can connect in community. That would be amazing. Number two, we have an Easter celebration coming up. And what we do at Speakeasy is we do have a bonnet contest. So I don't want you to get behind the ball. Go find your way to a dollar store or a thrift shop and get yourself a hat and glue a lot of stuff to it and show up, because we have a wonderful contest. It's just a display of creativity and it's a blast as a ball. And that day I'll also be having a toast and jam at my house. I'll be opening my home for anybody who wants to come and paint eggs or do whatever you do at Easter. And maybe you'll open your house too. Maybe you'll open your house to a few friends wherever you live, and we can celebrate together. And so that's all I'll say about that. And I'll thank you so much, Sherry, for helping to host today, and for Brianna and for Clive and for Joni and Mari and all the wonderful people who make this possible. God bless.
Thank you all for being here. We will see you next week or at some activities throughout the week. Love being here.